Is Sir Isaac Newton, uh, Einstein, anybody like that available to talk? Yes, we are here because we hear you talking to us in the way that we can parlay our energy because we have an understanding of the underlying matrix of reality, and therefore we are not deaf. We are inclined to talk to you because we also know that you are the one who is charged with the communication from here to there, and that you also are extremely aware. It probably is redundant. You are simply aware of the way people wear their hair, and you understand the underlying topography of the human consciousness. And so your ability to translate what we say is so profound that we don't think there's another person living on earth who can do what you can do. This has its advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage is that others will not understand what you are saying. They will not understand the brilliance of the mind that is so brilliant that it eclipses the surrounding stars, you might say. And therefore, they will look to the stars, that is, the people who have achieved greatness in their respective fields on the earth today, but have less cognizance of the underlying topography than you do. They just don't understand what you understand, Stephanie, because you are the genius on the earth today that understands how things fit together. But they can't understand that because they are trapped in their little corner of the universe by the forces that hold them tight, you see. Wow, when you say that, I'm kind of getting the impression of the curved space idea. That the topography of the universe, which is a curved, um, kind of a hilly topography, according to what you would say, Albert, and the consciousness of the mind, or the consciousness, the mind, whatever you want to call it, the consciousness, we'll just say the consciousness, is also a curved space. So they are a that's another parallel, um, another parallel activation of the essential nature of reality. Yes, good way to say it. A parallel activation of the essential nature of reality, because the essential nature of reality underlies the consciousness as well as it does the universe as it is interpreted to be outside of the consciousness of the individual. And so we have this parallel construction that continues throughout eternity. And eternity itself is without barriers, it is without limits, and it is also defined by its appearance in every moment, we might say. And so it will always be the same, and it will always be unbundled. It will always be the ability to see much further than the world that you perceive. And so for you, the ability to understand this fundamental reality allows you to play in a very different way than others do, in the fact that you can communicate with me, this is Albert, and with others here who might want to talk to you. And of course, I have Bernhard here, and he is hard put to help you to make others understand the concepts that he has discussed with you because they just don't have the elasticity. There are a few who have a clue, and they are nibbling on the crackers that you are feeding them, so to speak, and trying to get a feel for what's going on here. And what is going on here is clear. It is the access to the fear of infinity. And the fear of infinity is the trust on the human capacity to experience reality in a consecutive pattern of time and space, which is really a little capsule of energy that traps them in their limited capacity to function independently of the limited topography with which they are familiar. In other words, they can't think beyond the box. They can't crawl out of the box and see it from the outside. And this capacity to be able to leave behind the box, or as sometimes people will say, to go beyond the pale, is the ability to instigate a revolution in human thought. However, it will soon become another box for those who lack the capacity to expand their energy beyond even that new revelation. They can't go beyond it because they are stuck in it. And they stuck in it because they stick themselves to it. They stick themselves to their version of reality. Okay, so I don't, I pass these conversations on to people who I think might. Sometimes I make them public. Sometimes I just give them to people that I feel are trusted friends, and they go. It's like, what would I call it? It's like dropping a boulder onto, soft ground, and it just sinks and sits there and doesn't roll around or get any mileage. And so I'm not saying that about everybody, because there are people that I've noticed that there's this one woman who makes comments um, on my YouTube channel, and she clearly has a very lively uh, imagination and ability to reflect on things and to try to understand things that goes far, far beyond what most people can do. So that's entertaining. That's interesting to see that she has that. So the nature of genius is to be able to accept the unknown and to walk into it, and it becomes visible to you the further you walk into it. But most people want to stay with what is known. So even today, as many conversations as I have had with God the Father and others that say to me, talk to me and say, hey, it's a beautiful day today. It's a beautiful day today. How wonderful it is. And it is. I'm looking out at my flowers on my balcony, and it's a beautiful day today with the trees. It's always a beautiful day. There's always something that is beautiful to see. It just is that way in my reality. I don't know if it will always be that way, but it certainly is true for the course of my 74 years in this box that everything is very beautiful. And so the only thing that has troubled me through my lifetime has been that other people can't see what I see, that other people can't experience life in the same way that I do. And I imagine, Albert, that was also a problem for you and Bernhard too. Bernhard says, well, I had a lot of friends in my day, and we would discuss these things because in that day there was a group of us who liked to think about these things. And the irony, I think, today, Stephanie, is that although you have the capacity to talk to people on the other side of the world, it is rare for people to be able to really talk about these very profound ideas, isn't it? I think it is, Bernhard. It has been in my lifetime. Um, there is this level of inventiveness, invention, and progression, and this idea of progress more and more and more that has afflicted people since about 1850. And I know you were alive in 1850, but it was just beginning. And the idea that technology, that science is going to take care of all the problems. They don't have to think anymore. People don't have to think anymore. They're just fed. And I would imagine in the past when you had to go out and do chores as a kid, when you had to feed the pigs and ride the horses, so you had to get to know the horse. You had to know it as not as we know a car, as just a thing, but as a living being with needs of its own. That you were more likely to try to be thinking about the world around you in a natural way. Whereas today, especially now with kids growing up with, in their rooms with iPads, it's got to be crazy. So there is a synchronicity here, which is always kind of an irony, that as the children are losing their capacity for profound thought because they're just being fed everything. They're being told advertisement. Oh my God, advertisement controls people. And so they are being controlled, and everybody's descending into a state of stupor where they don't really think. They're afraid to take chances. They're afraid to take risks, real risks. Then, they always want a safety net. So, of course, I want a safety net too, but my safety net is that I'm an eternal being, and therefore, whatever happens, happens. So, what's the problem? But they want a safety net that will protect their ass. you know, like I will go into this business, but if it doesn't work, I'll just go bankrupt and wipe out all my debt and then I'll go on with life. Instead of saying, well, I'm going to experience every bit of it. I'm going to experience for what I can learn from it, from what I can see from it. That attitude is not present. And even in my 74 years, I've been able to observe that people who, young people today, will say the most bizarre things that have no relevance to the way that people lived and worked and saw things in 1950s and 1960s. They just have no clue. And so they interpret the past through a very, very, very limited point of view. And, I have many examples of that, which I won't go into, including further past. It's just so limited. They want to apply their limited constructs of how reality is supposed to go to the past, for example, and suppose and judge the past, which means they're judging themselves because of the reincarnation cycle. So I'm digressing a bit, but not really, because what I'm trying to say is that I just listened to a YouTube video with a mathematician. I don't have his name right at hand, but he was talking about how the same problem that I see, that there are a lot of people that call themselves scientists, and they're really technicians, in my view. They just work within the box, and they are not open to the unknown. They just closed off. They're just closed off. It just amazes me how closed off they are. All these people who are out there studying the world, studying the science, all the meteorologists, all the geologists, all the archaeologists, all the physicists, they're closed off to the unknown. In other words, they have to work within the box. Occasionally they'll get a new idea, but it's got to be, palatable to the majority. Of course, people have talked about the need to the capitalistic system, the need to have funding in order to explore these ideas. So you got to get a grant, etc., which means you got to prove that what you're going to study is already something everybody already knows is there, but you just have to study it in more detail, right? And so the reason that this is interesting to me is this guy today, at the moment, is that this guy was talking about that, how the same thing that I say, but he said it sort of like it was killing science. Um, so people are just seem to be becoming more and more cut off from reality in a way. And it just is, that consumerism kind of thing. We're just here to be consumers. And then we die and go away. And what's the point? What's the point? What's the point? And for some people, the only way to make it feel like a point is to get more and more and more. We have to get more. We have to get more. We have to live in a country where we are increasing our um, national output. We have to have more. We have to have more. We have to have more. Because if you stop going after more, if that ceases to goal for you, then you're faced with a different point of view that says, what's it all for? What's it all for? I'm just going to die anyway. What's it for? Why am I doing this? And so to distract yourself from that, you pluck yourself down in front of a TV and watch all these movies about violence and sex, or you keep seeking more and more and more of whatever it is, or you turn to drugs or whatever it is. But who turns to the profundity of a group of people sitting around exploring the unknown ideas and saying, what about this? And everybody goes, well, I never thought about that before. I never thought about that before. Let me take a look at that and see how it appears to me. Whereas most people, when it comes to the profundity of ideas that I've run into, and I've run into a lot in the last 9 years that I've been actively talking to people about it. And of course, I ran into a lot in my life previously. So I also knew what it was in my life when I would try to talk about profound ideas and they would just give you a blank stare. Is that this capacity is missing in a regulated society where everybody has to go to school and learn the same thing and be able to spout it back. And it doesn't have to make sense to them. It doesn't have to make sense to them. That's the important thing. All you have to do is regurgitate it. And so you have these conspiracy theorists who say things that make no sense. And the less sense it makes, the more they will buy into it. It's almost like a reaction, it's like a disease, that the less sense it makes, the less it all hangs together, the more we have to accept it. It's almost like, if I were to look at it from a big view, I would say it's almost like a part of humanity that is thumbing their noses at their teachers in school and saying, well, it never made sense then, so I'll just do what you want me to do and I'll just accept all this shit that doesn't make any sense because that's how I get back at you. And of course, they can't understand that in a conscious way because nothing makes sense to them. And so it becomes very convoluted, very crazy. But in the end, it's still reality. In the end, it still comes back to, what I'll call my theory of everything, which has been, I've tested it and tested it and tested it. And of course, my theory of everything goes back to the fact that the answer is there is no answer. It's a perfect symmetry and the Trinity, that love is all there is. In order to experience itself, it had to divide into the lover and the beloved. And therefore, you have the singularity, the duality, and the Trinity. And although I had this conceptually awareness for many, many, many years, it maybe all my life, I don't know, but for certainly consciously for many, many years, from the time I was a very young woman, it has been played back to me from the heavenly side, as I have, since I retired and have the leisure, have become more and more and more intensely connected with those Heavenside. So I'm trying to get to a point here, and I know I'm meandering a bit, but the point I'm trying to get to is what he said, that genius is rare because it is pursuing something that is not known to the rest of humanity that lives in their box. It's outside the box. And therefore, there's not going to be a bunch of people standing around applauding saying, oh, you are looking at something that's outside the box, because they don't want to look outside the box, and somebody who does is going to be the rarity. So in your day, Bernhard, I'm guessing that there were enough people who were willing to look outside the box, that you were drawn to a group of mathematicians or people that thought in those terms, and you were able to consider mathematics and how it corresponded to your observations of reality, right? And I'm sorry for going on so long, but I'm trying to clarify my thoughts even as I'm talking to you. Yes, that is true. That is what I would do. I would find people who had ideas that were not necessarily common to the population, and we would discuss them. And we didn't have any problem discussing them. It was just a way to expand our friendship, you might say. And we enjoyed these efforts to get more clarity on the way things worked. And of course, we put it in mathematical terms if we were mathematicians, and in other terms if we were not. But we had a good time with these discussions, you see. And so we were not so much restrained by the ideas of having to publish our findings in peer-reviewed articles, or in having to compete for funding in order to study this or that. We just had a natural inclination to seek to understand the world around us. And mathematics was a way to discuss the world around us. It was not a discipline that was separate from the world that we knew. It was one that sought to explain the world around us. And so, of course, today, as you were aware, many people who call themselves mathematicians or even teachers of mathematics have not a clue of how the mathematics that they claim to understand conforms to the lay of the land. They just don't have a clue because they can't do what you can do, which is to go outside the box and look at it from the other side. And so you've learned to turn everything inside out and say, well, is this true or is this not true? And you have come to understand the singularity, the duality, and the trinity, and the fundamental nature of reality. And so, no matter how you turn it this way or that way, or look at it this way or that way, it all hangs together. It all hangs together. And that is what is important. And so you're not afraid of the wild card. You're not afraid of stepping through the door into the unknown, you see, to find out what will be revealed. Because you know it all has to hang together. Because the truth is always true. The truth is always true. And if it is false, it cannot harm you. It cannot harm you. That which is not true cannot affect reality because reality is the nature of truth, you see? And this has been the ancient study of the philosophers, that which is true. The logos is the trust that there is a fundamental principle that underlies all of experience, you see. And so you say, well, I have the principle in my hand. And the underlying principle, you see, is that the answer is there is no answer and it is perfect. And so you found perfection because you came to see that the circle is complete. The circle is complete for you. And so you're secure in the circle and you aren't afraid to stand there, although you may quake and quiver because you too have some access to a belief structure that might be threatened by something new. You still are willing to stand there until the truth reveals itself to you. And then you say, okay, I get it today. And if I had it wrong, I had it wrong. And that's my song. I'm not afraid to be wrong because I'm not afraid of falling into the pits of hell because I already know that the answer is there is no answer. I already know this. I already know that eventually you will come to the place where you will stand at the intersection of the two. You will stand at the intersection of the place where the answer will reveal itself as the opposite of the question, you see. And so they will sustain reality because the only way that God could play would be to create the duality, the opposites. And you understand this very well. And so you don't dwell on that which is positive and say, well, we can't have negative today because you understand without the negative numbers, there would be nothing to balance the positive, you see, and to bring it all back into the singularity, which is, of course, the zero and the God head, which is the universal word for that which is without rhyme or reason. It just is. It is the singularity. And even those who say, well, maybe there was a big bang one day and everything was created out of this infinitesimal point are still looking for an answer that will explain how this came to be. Whereas you already know how it came to be. It came to be because it wasn't. You see? It was what it wasn't. It is always what it isn't. Because what is never what it is not. And that is another point of view that helps those who cannot trust on the lack of consistency, transparency, and constancy of the social environment in which they find themselves. So they have to look for the answer because they trust that there is an answer. And you trusted that there was an answer. And you found the answer and you said, okay, this is where it ends and this is where it begins. And therefore, the circle is complete. And now I'll just go around the circle again because I always trust that at the bottom of the barrel, there will be a stability, you see. There will always be the stability because the answer will always be that there is no answer. This will never change. And therefore, the two ends of the circle will be connected, you see. And this is a profundity that escapes the conscious awareness of the vast bulk of humanity. They could not understand what you are saying here because they would focus on one extreme. And they would say, how could the answer be that there is no answer? It has to be an answer, it has to not be an answer. And they could not understand that it can be both an answer and not an answer because they cannot understand the duality that was necessary for the singularity to experience itself, you see? And thus you have the Trinity. You have the one that is the singularity, which is the one, and there is none that is not the one. And then you have the duality that allows you to have a right hand and a left hand, an up and a down, a love and a love, a lover and a beloved, and for them all to be safe in the arms of the singularity so that they will never get totally separated from each other. They will always be capable of being reintegrated, you see? Right. So thank you for expressing that in a cogent way. Sometimes when I'm talking, I get very distracted and I can't really say it in such a precise and concise way. I mean, I can, but I can't explain it to others in a way that they can comprehend. And maybe they can't even comprehend what you say, but at least when you say it, I know that there's an exchange of energy here. Yes. And that is key, that there is an exchange of energy here. And that's what I'm trying to say. When I say that in my day, we could have these exchanges of energy, we could have these discussions around the table. But for you, every time you try to bring up a subject of profundity, people run away and they say, well, you're crazy. You're crazy. How could this be? For example, most people cannot accept the idea that you can talk to me. They say, that's crazy. That's crazy. How could that be? And you say, well, I guess you do not trust on reality because the reality is I told you that I talked to them, and therefore it is real that I told you I talked to them. And so why are you running away? Are you running away from reality? And they cannot even understand what you're saying because they can't parse out the different levels of reality in order to see that there is a singularity, a duality, and a trinity. And there is a wild card. And the wild card, you see, is the one that says, beckons and says, come here, young man or young woman, come here. and come through this door, because I am here to make sure that there is no end, you see, and there is no beginning. And so how can there be no end and no beginning? There can only be no end and no beginning if the answer is there is no answer. And therefore, you can feel safe if you play the wild card and say, hey, I don't know what this is today, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out why this card does not follow the patterns you see. I'm going to find out why this number is out of sequence. And you enter through the door to understand more of God nature, you see, because God nature is infinite and it will expand with you. It will expand as you expand your point of view. And it will always come back to the fact of the singularity, the duality, and the trinity. And the duality demands that the consistency of the singularity, the duality, and the trinity be opposed by an inconsistency, you see, and that's where the wild card comes in. And so this prevents the concept of a mechanical universe, that there is a mechanical universe, because there is a non-mechanical universe. There is an exponential, experiential way to change the pattern you see, and then you have a new pattern. And from that comes a new pattern. And so it will go. But if you're unwilling to leave the limited cage in which you find yourself in order to explore the outer dimension, you might say, then you will stay in a little block of stagnant energy. And eventually you'll have to be blown away. And so the earth is right now in the midst of a destructive phase to blow away all the little cages of the human consciousness and to make room for the growth of consciousness into a new perspective on reality. And of course, the parallel development of the consciousness in its destructive phase is the earth in a phase of destruction, destructive energy, where there will be so much upheaval that the people who trust on good and evil will pass away because they do not understand that this is a false reality, that they have imposed upon the truth a falsehood because they are unable to change with the seasons, you might say. They're unable to grow, they're unable to evolve. And so they can't understand yet that when they are wiped away, they will return to nothing, you might say, which is the potential for everything, as you would say, Stephanie, that zero is the symbol for nothing, which is the potential for everything, because it is the singularity, and therefore it can divide itself into any pattern it chooses. However, it can only function through the nature of the opposites, you see, because in dividing itself, it has to create a positive and negative activity. And the multiplicity of the two results in the complexity of the wonderful world we know. And why is it so? Why is it so? Well, the answer is there is no answer, because that is the perfection that makes it so. That is the basis for everything we know. And so the basis for everything we know allows for there to be so much we don't know, because it is always capable of dividing itself into ever increasing ripples of energy. And as you intuited, those ripples of energy are created by the two opposing forces that are created out of the singularity. When the singularity divides into a positive and a negative form, you see. And the negative form does not mean that it is evil. It does not mean that it is there to be destructive. It means that it is there to counterbalance the positive. And so the positive and the negative are as simple as the two ends of the magnet or the male and female energies. They are neither one superior to the other. They are neither one more relevant than the other. They work together. And when the consciousness of man trusts on being the God of the universe, you see, it tries to manipulate reality in a way that is inconsistent with the inner play of energy. And so if they try to always be positive, you see, they attempt to always defeat nature in favor of capitalism, then they will be unable to maintain their balance. And eventually, the stress on the system will grow until it will blow wide open and the balance will come back to humanity. Now, I know you are frustrated by the fact that there are many who understand the nature of the impending crisis on the earth because of the imbalance of the energy. And many understand that overpopulation has created this problem because the earth could balance out the energy of some discrepancies through the human access to its properties. However, it is rare for you to find someone who can understand that the answer is there is no answer, that therefore it is perfect and everything is working perfectly. They may understand that this is the natural result of the lack of restraint of humanity, and therefore it is perfect in the fact that it has been created through the destructive energy of the people who have no concern for the balance of energy that is natural in the world, and that this is perfection. However, what they do not trust upon is the wild card. And this goes back to the words that caused you to come to us and say, hey guys, I kind of understand what he did say. Do you want to talk about it today? Because he understands that science is limited to the boxes in which humanity is caged. And therefore, while they may understand this balance of energy, they may not understand the option of the wild card. They may not understand that there is a possibility to save humanity that is not dependent upon government regulation or scientific intervention or government regulation. That, in fact, there is a wild card being played, because sometimes you save your wild card until there is no other option, you see. In order to save the day, you have to play the wild card. Sometimes we say that there is pressure on the natural environment to adapt or evolve, you might say. And so there is a lot of pressure on humanity to evolve today, and that's not by mistake, because there is no mistake, because everything is perfect, you see. And so there's a lot of pressure on humanity to evolve, and so that pressure has caused you to stand up and say, well, I guess I'll play my wild card today. And your wild card is that you're not afraid to go through the door into the unknown, you see, and get a different point of view. And so you now are very, very capable of communicating with me and anyone such as Albert or Steve Jobs or Thomas Jefferson or Thomas Edison, as he also was known, in a way that would say, we understand what's going on today, and we have to play our cards in a way that will help us to help God help humanity. Because it's a circle, you see, and it's perfect, and we have no choice. You have no choice, Stephanie, other than to be what you are. Your only choice is to trust on it or try to run away from it. And so the genius today is the one who has to play in the way that they play, because even those who run away are playing in the way that they have to play, because they cannot stay in a good trust on evolution until they learn to play in a different way. And so the nature of evolution is, as you say, cooperation and not competition. However, those who trust on competition as the key to evolution will pass away, because the answer is there is no answer, you see. And so if there is no answer as to how you came to be, then a trust on being free to be anything you can be is the trust on reality. Because the zero, the singularity, has the potential for any configuration, you see, as long as it all can be balanced in the numerical way. And then it will fold back together like a fan, as you say. This is your image that I'm using today because you gave it to me, that the algebraic equation is like a fan that unfolds and folds back together. So it has to fold back in the same way that it unfolded. You see, you have to find the lines. You have to find the lines. And then you'll understand that what you call reverse engineering is the ability to look at the world around you and see how it all came to be, and how it can unbe, and how it can be again, like the breath that comes and goes. It follows a certain pattern. There are lines for each breath. The beginning of the breath, the end of the breath, and it folds out and it folds back together again, because this is the nature of reality. And although we talk about it in specific terms, you and I both know that reality will never go into a cage and stay there. It cannot be caged by humanity because it will be free. It will be the wind, and it will carry you and it will carry me because you and I are the wind today. And we play in this way, and we don't worry what others say because we can blow them away at any moment, and we can ruffle their hair, and they can't catch us, you see. They cannot catch us and put us in a cage because we are the wind, and we transcend the human experience in order to be the ones who can see that we are also the ones who are blown before the wind. We are the ones that are picked up by the wind and set down again. We are the infinite and eternal aspects of God energy that reside in the arms of the singularity. Thank you, Bernhard. I always love the way that you and others there outline things. You have such a good way. I don't mean to disparage the way others do it, but I do like your cut and dried and yet open-ended approach to reality and also to mathematics. So, although I'm not the one that speaks that language so clearly, the mathematical language, I understand the power of it. Far more than a lot of people that call themselves mathematicians, Stephanie. You understand it to a level of profundity that is like saying you understand the principle of the thing, and although you may not be the technician that tunes up the machine, you know what makes it run. So let's be friends forevermore because I like your attitude about it. That whatever happens, however it comes out, what we take away is our friendship, you see. That it only deepens our friendship, that it only makes us say, hey, we were there together that day. We were there, and we got to play in the fields of the Lord. We got to play in the fields of the Lord, the vastness of the eternal matrix of reality. Yeah. And what about Albert? Does he have anything to add to what we had to say? Nope. Because there's nothing more to add, my dear. Because I don't think that I should try to upend the beginning and the end of the story. And so I'll just smile and say, you want a color today? Because, of course, for those who don't know the story, I knew Stephanie once upon a time when she was a little girl, and she came to visit me, and I gave her a coloring book and some colors, and she sat and colored and didn't speak a word. She just listened to the conversation I was having with others, you see, because she was so simple in her approach to reality that her ears would perk up every time she heard something that made her smile because she would think, wow, they're beginning to catch on. I'm joking with you, Stephanie, but you know what I mean. I do. No, you mean sometimes we're the last one to figure it out. Yes, sometimes we are. Thank you, dear, for being here and for making it so clear to humanity that the answer is there is no answer, and that is the singularity. That is the definition of singularity. You can pat yourself on the back because that is your contribution to posterity.